Hello and welcome to another episode of the Phoenix Wisdom Podcast. I am your host, Janet Sandberg, and today we are joined by Darla Ridilla, who is a high-value woman and helps other women feel like they're also of high value. And we're going to learn more about that later and what brought her to that. Darla, welcome.
Thanks for having me today.
So happy you're here. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name is Darla, and I am a relationship coach. And so I help women who are unhappy in their relationships, whether they're in one right now or they're in the dating world. I have, through my healing journey and also over the past year, really dating differently myself, have discovered that while I am still seeking that healthy relationship, I am getting so much closer to it because I've learned to self-validate, not look for men for validation. And I'm just sharing that experience with other women to help them along that path.
Amazing. Yeah. So important. But yeah, let's find out how you got to that place by going back in time and tell us what was going on in your life when you thought you didn't want to live it anymore.
Yes. So in 2013, I had been going through a divorce. I had been with a man for 10 years, and I thought he was the love of my life. I literally went from thinking I had everything to the day that I found myself on the floor feeling that I had nothing. And to kind of paint that picture, it looked like a fairy tale in the beginning. I met this very handsome man who swept me off of my feet. He seemed to be everything I had always wanted. He was attentive. He gave me a lot of the attention that I was really craving in my life. And as those years progressed, I fell madly in love with him. There was all these things that happened that, we went on this trip to Italy, and it was just beautifully romantic. He proposes to me at the top of Pikes Peak, all the fairy tale movie. Then 10 years into the relationship and 6 years into the marriage, he suddenly asked for a divorce out of nowhere. Looking back, I know that wasn't the case, but in that moment, I could not understand what was happening because we had been getting along. And 2 days later, he tried to recant that. We were renting a house, and he said, "We've got 2 years left on the lease. What are we going to do?" There was a shred of the strong person, the little girl that I was, the strong little girl that rose up and said, "No, I'm not going to stay." And so I did end up leaving. And what I discovered through the divorce process, actually about a year later, around the time right before I almost took my life, is that I had been with a narcissist. So when I found myself on the floor, I'd lost all my money. When he wanted the divorce, he had financially abused me. So I had no job, no savings. I had given everything to him because we were going to invest in real estate. I was barely getting by financially, dead up to my ears. And I was devastated. I didn't understand I was trauma bonded to this man. Sure. I was devastated that I had lost him. And I was laying on the floor sobbing face down. And I'm like, I can't keep living like this. I cannot keep doing this. And I was literally planning it like, I'm going to take the gun, but I better get on the internet and find out how to do it right because I want the bullet to hit the right spot and kill me immediately. I don't want to end up a vegetable because I did it wrong. That's how close. And then a thought came into my mind that he was spreading a lot of stories about me. He was telling people I was crazy, even though I wasn't.
Right.
And if I took my life, I was giving him fuel for his fire. And I wish I could tell you I didn't do it because of my daughter or, but that's really not the truth. The truth is I did it because I didn't want him to win. Yeah, I mean, literally. And so in that moment, I cried out to my higher power and I said, I cannot keep living like this. I don't know how to fix it. But if I'm not going to take my life, you better show me the way. There you are.
Surrender in its biggest and purest meaning, right?
Right. Right. And, and I think in that moment of surrender, that is when it opened it up. And these people came into my life. I had a counselor who I started to see, and she's the one who got me to understand I had been in an abusive marriage, which I denied very strongly in the beginning. But then she kept telling me, hey, this isn't love. This is manipulation. And then I started to educate myself. I read the book, The Gaslight Effect, and realized it described my everyday life. Like,
Wow.
yeah.
Wow.
Then I went, yeah, I mean, it was astounding. I've said so many times, I swear that woman had a camera in my house. It was just really an eye-opener. And, there was the spiritual center I had been going to. You talk about, divine intervention. So if you go back to 2012, my house almost burned down.
Oh.
And during that time, yeah, I mean, there's so many caveats that I wish we had more time. But 2012, my house almost burned down. And so during that time, we met a friend who introduced us to positive thinking, Wayne Dyer. And so I started getting really into the spiritual center, and that was also my saving grace. So while I was going through these trials in 2013, those women that were there for me when I needed them the most. Totally did a revamp on my my social circles, and I honed it down to like 4 or 5 really strong women, because I was a mess, crying, lying in bed all the time. I mean, very, very depressed. But these women were able to help me to get through that first year and to help me and support me. And so gradually go ahead.
Well, I just said that's amazing.
And so, it's been 11, 12 years now, but that first year or so was really pivotal for me, because I started to realize that there was something going on in me that I needed to fix. While I'm not responsible for other people's behavior, something inside of me was broken. Not that I'm wrong or, something's like I'm not less than, but I realized that there was a void in me and I was filling it with the wrong things.
Interesting. Yeah. Because, we don't get into those relationships with unhealthy people or into unhealthy relationships unless we are unhealthy at some level. And a lot of it is invisible, especially when we get into these relationships when we're young. We just don't have the life experience to know that maybe this isn't so good. And so much of that narcissistic behavior is so subtle. Like, yeah, of course you didn't see it, because it starts off great and then it slowly builds and it's all super subtle and nobody else sees it. Nobody else knows it's happening. Yeah. Been there.
Right.
Yeah.
And, in those moments when you were really on the edge, now I almost laugh at those signs on bridges. Don't do it. Call this number. To be quite honest, if I had been on a bridge, I probably would have done it. I understand like what it's like to be in that moment. And, people say a lot, oh, it's such a selfish act, but you're not in that headspace in that moment. In that moment, all you can think of is, I hurt so bad and I do not see a light at the end of that tunnel.
Exactly. Yeah, I was quite surprised. We went on a couple of big hikes. We were on a tour of the Midwest in November, and we were on these hikes, and, we'd come to a cavern or something like this, and there would be a sign, or a cave, and there would be a sign saying, if you're in crisis, please call or text 988. And I'm like, first of all, I volunteered with 988. So I was like, I am so amazed that they have these signs in their advertising, and it's become so visible that people know, but also it's kind of like, the reason they put warning labels on on things is because somebody's done something stupid, don't put your hairdryer in the water. This coffee is hot, so the reason those signs are there is because they've had issues with people going there to end their lives, which just made me so sad. Like, on the one side, I was like, oh, I'm so glad that they're helping people. They're out there, but at the same time, it's like, this is like a go-to spot for people when they're at their lowest, which, I mean, I guess go somewhere beautiful, but
I know. And I hope that signs have helped someone. When I say that, I'm not saying that I don't, but I also understand when you're in that moment, that's the last thing you want to do is talk to somebody about it. You just don't. You don't want to be talked out of it. You want to talk yourself into it.
Yeah. Well, you never know. Sometimes.
You're right about that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. So for the people who are like, oh, there is somebody that I can talk to about this right now, and just be there like, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Like, I don't really want to die. I just want this pain to end.
Yeah, I think that's a very good description, actually. We don't.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. Okay. So you had these amazing supportive women around yourself. And then how did you pick up the pieces? And you were like, I'm not going to do this because, screw him. I don't want him to win, which is great. We all have those moments too. And especially, if he's telling these terrible stories about you, if you ended your life, you'd have no way to refute them. And then you would be gone and people would think these things about you. Or
Exactly.
not. The people who really knew you obviously would never think that about you.
I
But
think they would have, though, because they're such good story makers. They're very good at what they
that is
do.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, so they really kind of gave me that push that I needed to start getting my life together. And it probably took about a year for me to really reach that point of any level of sanity, let's say. I did end up having to leave the Denver area and move to Santa Fe because my ex was stalking me at this point. So I'm actually really glad that I got it together, because then I had to move to another city and I didn't have a job, and I had to have that bandwidth in my mind to start over. And
Huh.
I do think that helped, removing myself, even though it was very difficult to leave what I consider home, which is Colorado. Putting that distance between me and him, while he continued to stalk me, there was still a physical distance. So in my mind, I think it created a mental distance. And so that
Yeah.
also helped for me to move on.
Yeah. Well, and for him to actually do anything, he'd have to fly across the country. And most of the time, they're not really interested in that. They just want to mess with us, right?
I'd have to disagree with that. He's still a danger to me. Yes.
Okay.
I would have to, and not always. And some of them maybe
Yeah.
they aren't, but he is dangerous. And there's different levels of them too. They're not all that dangerous.
That is true.
Right. I think still putting that physical danger helped me really mentally to move on. And then I could start to rebuild my life. And it really has been over these years. It's been a gradual thing, and I'll have spurts, like I'm in a spurt right now. But then some days it's just been one day at a time. And I really am glad that I was able to recognize that as long as I wake up and today I've done my best and I'm maybe just one step further than I was yesterday. Or even if I took a step back, I'm going to get up and start over. I am very, very much of like a growth mindset, resilient. And so I think that also helped. It's kind of ironic that I grew up in a very abusive childhood. And so I had to learn as a child that I was the only one I could depend on. And I was a scrapper and fought back. My dad was quite the bully. But I also think in that time of my life, it served me very well. Because I knew I could depend on me. If nobody else, I had myself, and I have a tenacity, and I'm kind of like, oh, you told me I can't do that, I'll show you, kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And I do think that helped.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it did. So you moved to Santa Fe, and then obviously you would have had to like get a job and find new friends. And what else did you do to build yourself back up?
Yeah, I did. So I'm a singer, so I usually gravitate towards karaoke to build a community. So that's what was my start, and I did. And I'm a hiker. Yeah, I'm a hiker. So every time I'm a kind of a gypsy, so I move a lot. And so when I go to a new city, I will get into a meetup.com group and meet other hikers or, social groups and so forth. Fortunately and unfortunately. So it's both. I did meet another man in Santa Fe, and I did end up marrying him. And not a narcissist, not abusive. He had his own challenges, for sure. Very good person, but unfortunately, alcohol was addiction, was unfortunately the issue. Looking back this is where we have to have grace for ourselves. I made the best decision in that moment, being who I was at that time. Today, I wouldn't have made the same decision, but I married him too quick. And we ended up moving to Washington State. Unfortunately, our marriage ended in Washington, but it was a learning experience as well. I'm on good terms with him now, and I wish him well. But it led to other things. So I moved to Washington State. It's kind of that 6 degrees of separation, but you're always learning and you're always growing. For me, it's been every time I've gotten out of a relationship, it's taking some time off to just really kind of evaluate where I am, how I can improve. I'm in that right now. I just got out of a relationship just under 2 months ago, and I'm just about to kind of get back out there, get my feet wet again. But I've taken some time to say, what happened here? What else is going on inside of me that day? So here's the thing. With the day that I got off that floor and I didn't take my life, I really hold that as my motivation, that I'm no longer going to be in situations that don't serve me. I'm going to embrace life and live it. I'm going to, this past year was the year of joy. I didn't like my job, so I quit and started a business. But all of that goes back to that day. That it was kind of like a reset button for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's, that's our lowest point. There's nowhere to go but up from there. And
Right.
we get to create a new life for ourselves and have it look however we want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It kind of doesn't feel like that at the time.
Oh, it definitely did feel like it. But, we have to look even at that situation. It was actually a huge blessing because it shifted everything for me. Like, if I'm going to get up and live, I'm going to live. I'm not going to be like this.
Yeah. I read a quote the other day. I can't remember who it's by, but it was something like, I'm not going to end my life because I haven't lived yet.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing. Like, if we're going to do this, like, let's do it right. Let's enjoy it and do things, work in jobs that we like. And that might not be immediate, initially you might just have to get whatever comes your way, but don't stay stuck there, keep moving forward and move from that to something else and improve a little bit every time till you're where you want to be, whether it's with, with your job or with relationships or, not everything is going to work out perfectly the first time.
No.
And as we heal, then everything else trends upwards.
That's so true. And something I really haven't talked about yet is that suicidal ideation was kind of like a best friend to me my whole life up until that day.
Oh.
Off and on, even as a child, I would have thoughts of it. And it was almost like a normal, it was normalized in my head.
Right.
And it's not normal. It's well, there's nothing wrong with that thought, but I didn't realize that not everybody thinks that way.
Right. Right. Yeah. And now that you say that, like, I remember being in high school and being like, well, if this, that, or the other thing doesn't work out, then, I can always just not be here. Like, that's fine. And yeah, like a lot of people don't think that way.
No,
you don't know that because you don't share those thoughts with people. And be like, so, what's your backup plan? And theirs is like, oh, it's, this something normal. Like, I'll go get a job or I'll move in with my best friend or, it's not taking your life, which
yeah, I mean,
it took me a long time to realize that, yeah, that's not a normal train of thought for most people.
Oh, no, it isn't. If I look back, I was a different person. I had a lot of circumstances that I can understand why I was there. But I'm really grateful now that I have moved past that. And gosh, now it's kind of the opposite. I feel like in my mid-50s, like I'm racing the clock. Oh, I have so much I want to get done before my time comes naturally. What do I do with this?
Yeah. Yeah. Age versus youth. We have a very different perspective on that. Like when you're young, I guess because you don't know what's coming. So it's a lot easier to just be like, I can stay, I can go. But then as you get older, you're like, oh, but there's not that much time left. I've got to use it and I've got to live and I've got to enjoy it. Like I've spent, also in my early 50s, like there's so much that I haven't experienced yet. There's so much time I feel I've wasted, just dealing with trauma and crap that was going on that, nearly broke me, but didn't. I was like, okay, now I've got the best years of my life ahead of me. And I know that they're going to be the best years because I'm going to make them that way. Even if other stuff happens, there's always external parts of life we have no control over. But, you know, it's my choice how I react to those.
Right. I think that's a great way of putting it, because it's not what others do or say around us, but it is how we react to it that really defines us.
All right. So, gosh, you have moved around a lot.
Oh, I think they're going back to Colorado.
That's awesome. I love that. I've moved around a lot too. Not so much in the last, 15 years, but I moved a lot before that to like different countries and stuff. So I get it. It's always a new adventure now. So how did you decide to take all of that and become a coach to help other people?
Yeah. So last year, there was kind of a couple of things. First of all, I declared 2024 to be my year of joy. And I decided that anything that didn't bring me joy, I was going to get rid of. And that, unfortunately, was friends, relationships, and my job. And I had started working on a certification to become a somatic trauma-informed coach. I don't know if you're familiar with somatics, the body and
I was going to say, but explain it for the listeners.
Go ahead.
No.
Okay. So somatics is basically our nervous system. And when we have an experience, mostly traumatic, our brain records that memory, but our body also does. And it will actually get stuck in the body if we don't release it. And you'll often have body sensations that are related to that. And when you have a current body sensation when you're stressed, it often connects to a previous experience that's kind of trapped in that body. So I was getting trained in how to do that. And that was February. And then in April, I had left a job and actually went to another one. And 3 days in, realized it was worse than the job that I had left, and I was more unhappy. So not that the boss that I had left was a bad person. I just, quite frankly, don't like working for other people. I don't like being told what to do. And I was getting triggered a lot. There was a lot of things going on where I was getting triggered, and I knew it wasn't good for my mental health. So I needed to do that for me. So when I walked away from the other job, I realized I really don't want to go back to work for somebody else. I'm really done. I'm so done with this. I had turned 55, and this is where the self-acceptance started. And I said, I'm a gypsy. I like to move. I don't like being told what to do. And I'm also experiencing some challenges. It's more been here in Arizona than anywhere else, that some of the licensed therapists don't understand narcissistic abuse, and that it's actually brainwashing. I've been in a cult per se. And so I was getting re-traumatized, victim blamed. They were one in particular is being very demanding, literally telling me what to do. It was not a good experience. And other states, I've not had that experience. And I became very frustrated.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find an in-person support group. There's a lot of other things, grief support, there's addiction support, but I couldn't find anything for narcissistic abuse. And so I decided, instead of complaining about it, that I was going to create what I desired. And I did not. Yeah, I thought I was good. I finished the first level certification earlier last year, and I am just finishing up a qualification that's master's equivalent in credits. And I decided I'm going to take this knowledge and my lived experience, and I'm going to help others, because that's really what I wanted, was someone who, those therapists that had gone through those experiences were the best ones, because they really helped me. And at 55, while my original plan was to get a master's, I was not quite, just almost at an associate's, and I didn't want to spend 5 more years of my life and a lot of money to get that master's. So that's how I got into coaching. And I started out specifically with trauma and narcissistic abuse. And over these past few weeks, going through this most recent breakup, I realized that I understand narcissistic abuse very well in relationships or romantic relationships. So I want that to be my focus. I didn't have parents that were narcissists, just dysfunctional. And I feel like in this past year, as I've really gotten straight with myself and learned how to be okay with who I am, accept who I am, validate myself without that outside validation, it's really changed the game on how I date. And so that's why that relationship is, I'm real time in my podcast and on my blog. If I have a breakup, I'm talking about it. I am talking about the mistakes I've made and what I've learned and how I'm going to do better. Woe to anyone who dates me because your life will be public. But I feel even though I am still seeking what I desire, I'm getting closer and closer to it. And I feel there's some kind of value in being just authentic and sharing. This is what I've learned, kind of like, podcasting. I don't know how to do it all, but I can share with a brand new one how to do it. It's kind of the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that. And especially just that, I can't find what I'm looking for, so I'm going to create it myself, which is kind of this podcast too.
There you go.
Have people tell stories about the time that they thought they might commit or die by suicide, and because people weren't talking about suicide enough. So I'm like, can't find it, create it.
I love it. And I love that you talk about it. It's a difficult subject and people don't want to talk about it. But maybe if we had more awareness, people wouldn't feel so alone.
Exactly. That's the whole goal of this podcast, is just, feeling less alone when you're in it. And like we said before, you often don't have the strength at that time to go out and talk to somebody, but you can listen to stories and you can, get that glimmer of hope by knowing that so many other people have been there and made it through and out the other side and are now doing super awesome things and helping other people.
Right.
Yeah. What would you tell to the person who is in that space right now and they're listening to our podcast?
I would say that I see you and I understand where you are. And I know how bad you're hurting because I've been there. You're not alone. And I know you can't see that light, but if there's something inside of you that can just surrender to your circumstances and see where those doors open, even though you can't see it, maybe if you can just if you can use the hope I have for you, I see for you now, while you can't have it for yourself, maybe that would be enough just to see what happens. That the pain, it is intense and it does feel like it's not going to go away. But maybe just around the corner, there is going to be just a peephole that's going to show up.
Yeah. Beautiful. I love that. Thank you. And thank you so much for being here today and sharing your story and inspiring others and doing the work that you're doing in the world. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. Remember that you are loved, you are worthy, you are valuable, you are meant for more, and that it really does get better. If you are in crisis, there are numbers that you can call or text to get the help that you need. That information for Canada and the US is in the description below each episode. If you are in immediate crisis, please call 911. We love you, and I hope you'll listen again.